In the restaurant of life, we're putting freedom back on the menu. It's the Missouri Liberty Report with John Williams, working with grassroots organizations and legislatures to make Missouri the freest state in the nation. Let freedom ring.
All right, folks, and we're back with another edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. As you can see, my co-host is back this week on a live stream. Proud new papa, so there's that. And we've got a lot of stuff that we want to get into tonight. Brandon, you took 2 weeks off, and it didn't get any less stupid. I don't know.
Better. Oh.
Yeah, I know. It's not. Anytime I've taken a Friday off, I'm thinking, oh, maybe, when I come back, I won't have much to talk about. Yeah, right. We're getting so close to election time. Here's something I don't want to go into, like, deep discussion. I don't want to take a deep dive into this. But some guys at work were talking about the whole P. Diddy thing. And I was like, yeah, you know what's really funny about that? We're this close to the election, and they're going to flood the airwaves with this stuff. And people aren't going to pay attention that are, seemingly we're getting marched towards World War III with this shadow missile system stuff and everything else. But, yeah, it's going to be P. Diddy, P. Diddy, P. Diddy. It's like, yeah, what are the – and then, in the meantime, apparently I didn't get a chance to, like, look into it, but there was some kind of gathering at the White House, and Jill Biden is sitting with a group of people, and there's no Joe Biden.
So I'm pretty sure it was the cabinet meeting. It's the first cabinet meeting that they've had in over a year, and Joe Biden was there, but Jill Biden led it in the most, like, wannabe Nancy Reagan moment I've seen this century. I mean, I've talked on this show before about how I think she's got a big head and how she thinks, she thinks she's doing some big heroic act by, like, helping the media get Joe Biden through the rest of this election. But we all see through it. Like, everyone, at least half of the country sees through how even the Democrats acknowledged that Joe Biden's not all the way there, or else they'd have let him keep running for president. So, I mean, it's bananas. It's crazy that they still let him be the president, that she'll lead a cabinet position versus just making him step down. I guess they're too afraid of Kamala Harris being the president, because then she'll have to do something. Like, she can't just say, when I'm president, I'll do something. She'll be the president. She'll have to do something. And she's not good at that part, so.
Yeah, I wish sometimes, I don't know. I wish I could say, like, when we talk about Kamala Harris and some of this stuff, I wish I could just say whatever springs to mind. Because I tell people all the time that if you tell me a funny story, right? Now, I'm laughing because the story is funny. What people don't understand is, while they're telling me the story and they're getting to the end of the story, in my head, I'm making up 3 alternate endings to the story that you're telling me. And so when somebody comes on and they, you see these people, you see a clip of Kamala Harris talking or Donald Trump talking or whatever, and it gets towards the end, there's this back and forth between, whoever in the media. In my head, I'm just thinking all kinds of, this would be really funny if this happened, or this would be really funny if this happened. And I don't know. There's something wrong with my head. I need to go get examined because clearly I've got some issues. I cannot make it stop.
Well, I'll tell you what. Watching Kamala Harris talk for about 5 uninterrupted minutes will make you think crazy things. It's not just you, John. You watch her for 5 minutes, you start to think that you're also going a little bit crazy. Because she'll say in one breath, I am not going to come after. I'm a gun owner. I have guns. I'm not coming after your guns. And then 1 second later, say she's going to ban assault weapons, which is just the funniest. It's been like, I thought 10 years ago they stopped using assault weapons because they couldn't define them. Like, I know they had an assault weapons ban, but like the term assault weapon doesn't actually have a meaning towards a weapon. So I don't know.
That's the thing. It's just all these, all the terminology and stuff that they throw out. It's all arbitrary. It's so vague. It's so gray that then they can just insert whatever fits the narrative at that time. And there's like, well, okay, well, that's this week is what, this week, this is what this word means. Now, next year, those words will mean something completely different. And you're like, I can't freaking keep up with you people. And that, but a lot of the problem is there's a whole boatload of people who can't catch on to that.
I will say from my experience at the hospital, not very many nurses, I'm not going to say which hospital or anything like that, but I will say that none of the nurses referred to my fiance as a birth-giving person. She was a mother. She was a woman the whole time. No, there was no confusion. She was not just a birth-giving person. They referred to her as a woman, and I respected that. They didn't give us all of that modern-day BS,
mumbo jumbo.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I believe the more the state takes over medicine, and I guess it'll start in the medical schools, and then that stuff will trickle down, and then once you get the next generation of doctors start saying these ridiculous things. And then, well, I don't know what the term would be. I'm just a white male, so God knows what I'll be called by that time, because there's so much supposed racism built into everything that God knows what they're going to call me. I might just be Honky Pete. Like, oh, hey, Honky Pete, come on in. I got a name. Like, no, not anymore. You're white and you're a male. You are now Honky Pete. Come on back.
Oh,
and I have to give my date of birth because there's just a whole boatload of Honky Pete's Cracker Carl come forward, and they're like, I got a name, man. Nope.
I like Honky Pete better. I actually, that's a good country artist name, Down by the Sticks with Honky Pete.
Picking his banjo.
Oh yeah.
Washing his feet. We better not make a song.
So I just really quick note, another interesting thing about the hospital trip, just interesting, weird note. So they wouldn't let us leave the hospital without having a pediatrician, without having without immediate care. They wouldn't release her. But when we were calling around to different doctors' offices, they were all saying that the doctors, 3 different places that we called, said that the doctors refused to go off of, or they refused to deviate from the CDC's guidelines on vaccines. Now, I'm not with the polio vaccine, I'm not that's I'll let my daughter have the polio vaccine. It's that one proves to stop polio. It stops it in its tracks, and it has a proven track record over X amount of years. My concern would be is if they start mandating the COVID vaccine and the flu vaccine and RSV vaccine and all of these temporary vaccines that they have to get over and over again that aren't proven, that funnel money to the big pharmaceutical companies. I'm uncomfortable having to choose a doctor. I don't know. The whole system was just weird, that it made me go to a doctor, that the hospital made me choose a physician. And then every physician's office that I called said that they refuse to deviate away from the CDC's guidelines on vaccinations. Now, I don't think right now that covers COVID and the flu. I think we still have choices on those right now, but I'm afraid of when that changes, or different vaccines, of any kind of vaccines that come in, that all of these pediatricians force you to stay on these guidelines. I know eventually I might be able to find a doctor that has more informed consent and will let me make my own decisions as far as my own daughter's health. But it's just, I don't know, for anyone who's skeptical of the big pharmaceutical companies and all of the different mandated vaccines, it was just very interesting as a new parent, something I had to kind of navigate through a little bit.
And that's the thing too. Tom Woods just had a doctor. I was listening to it this morning. I think it was this morning on the way to work. He had this doctor on, who's written a book, and he's talking about how some of the things they push. It's the whole cholesterol thing. blows that up, and some other stuff.
Like I didn't see it. Was he basically saying that like fatty foods and high cholesterol foods aren't necessarily killers, and they don't lead to heart attacks? Is that the gist of what they were saying?
I mean, when he's in that, he said, you know, the guy that came up with this whole cholesterol thing, that research, all the data he put, it was all stupid. And yeah, basically he said fatty foods and cholesterol type foods are not the problem. He said it's more processed grains, processed foods that are causing the problems, because your body produces cholesterol. It needs it to create certain hormones and things for your body to regulate itself. So if you start cutting out cholesterol, I mean, your brain is literally a big bulk of cholesterol. If you take a pill to cut your cholesterol down, you're just tricking the body. From what I understand, I'm not a doctor, clearly, but from what I've heard is that it tricks your body into not producing cholesterol. I have heard doctors also say that they have seen a pattern in the that the doling out of statin drugs and the cases of dementia and Alzheimer's. Just like steadily on the same upward trend. So he sees statin drugs, and he sees these neurological things going. They're almost like direct correlation between the amount of prescriptions they've handed out and then the cases of Alzheimer, dementia, stuff like that, also in correlation, climbing.
Are you saying the statin drugs, are those like blood thinners?
No, that's the cholesterol drugs.
Right. I didn't know if sometimes they use blood thinners to help with. I guess I thought it was cholesterol. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm also not a doctor, so.
Well, if you've had a heart attack or you have a blockage that they go and they have to put stents in or do a bypass, then you will be on blood thinners to help make sure the blood flows through newly created arteries, or if they put the stent in to make sure. But yeah, the problem doesn't seem to be, oh, this guy eats a lot of steak, so you know he's going to die of a heart attack or whatever. It's like, no. Now, I've also heard people say, my buddy Sam had a guy on his show. He was a doctor. And he said, because he's like, right at the end of the interview, he's like, you know, the guy is in his 70s or 80s, and he doesn't look it or sound it. And he's like, so what's your diet like? He goes, no seed oils, no dressings, no anything like that. And he goes, I am a vegetarian eater. So he eats meat, but he doesn't fry anything. He grills it or bakes it, but he doesn't fry anything. Because he said the problem you get into is when you take fat and you fry it, you turn it to trans fat, and that can cause issues. But if you're grilling it or baking it, you're not turning those fats into something else. And I don't know. It's a whole thing. We could spend 2 hours on this just because it is okay. Again, I don't agree with RFK on a lot of his financial policy, right? Like money things, I don't agree with him on. But it was I think some people underestimate how big it was for him when he basically came out and said he was going to back Trump in the election. That he did a long speech and spent a major part of the time discussing the health issues that are threatening the people of this country. And the facts that he was throwing out, you know, he's like, you know, 30, 40 years ago, someone would go to the doctor, a doctor would be lucky to see one kid with diabetes. And then he turns around and said, nowadays, it's 1 in 3 kids are pre-diabetic or diabetic. And he's just going through a myriad of diseases that we're seeing that are becoming more prevalent, and it seems to be tied a lot to our diets. And so people, you know, I know some people are like, but it's like the people that are interested in health, and I'm talking anywhere from just like naturopathy, not the general what do they call it, public health, but they're really trying to get healthy without prescription drugs and everything else, right?
Holistic.
Yeah, holistic, naturopathic, whatever. And they were like, this is huge. Because, and the question everybody that heard it and really sat down and dwelled on it went, yeah, the media ignores it and goes, oh, they just cut him off. But, they're willing, the government, the state is willing to push to everybody gets health insurance, and they're wanting to do, of course, at some point they'd like a single payer system. None of these people who say they want you to be healthy ever talk about what RFK talked about. Why are so many people sick? Why are so many people dealing with inflammation issues? They don't bring that up at all. Nothing. It is crickets. So I thought it was really big and really cool that RFK used that and took that opportunity and brought that to the forefront because, again, I'm not a huge RFK fan. There's some things he's good on, some things I don't agree with him on. But when you have that last name, it's important when these people, even though the media glosses over it, they want to ignore it. It's important for people to hear this information. He's talking to a crowd that he doesn't normally talk to at all, and he just throws all these facts out. That's huge. That's really big. And that can maybe, I'm not saying it will, but sometimes you get a big name like that in front of a crowd that he normally wouldn't speak in front of, throwing out these facts. Maybe you get, even if you get a few people out of a few hundred to go, whoa, and go home and start digging in, and they start talking to their friends and family. Sometimes that's what it takes to get an idea going, is to get somebody in front of a crowd that he generally wouldn't speak in front of, or she wouldn't generally speak in front of, and just get right down to brass tacks, spit the facts, and then just go, okay, I've done my spiel, and then you see if that information starts rolling out. But it'll be interesting to see if anything comes of that. I was just happy that he did it, because he could have gone up there and just puckered his lips and kissed Trump's butt the whole time, and he just smack talk censorship, the Democrats, and then got onto a health kick and went on for minutes and minutes of his speech. And I thought it was, what a great use of time to actually talk about something that should be really important. When we talk about, they're always talking, oh my God, the healthcare system's, it's overloaded and it's multi-billion-dollar industry and blah, blah, blah. Okay, but why? They leave out the why. They just talk about, we got a growing need for nurses and doctors. Why? Yeah, the population's grown, but everybody's sicker, and you none of you guys are talking about it. So I found that interesting.
No, right. If Trump gets elected and he actually gets to be a part of Trump's cabinet or campaign circle or whatever, hopefully he makes improvements there, because he's got that book. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. But
the real Anthony Fauci?
Yeah. So obviously, and so he knows what he's talking about, clearly. And he knows the game, basically. So hopefully Trump will put him somewhere where he can make a difference. The head of the CDC would be interesting. That would be a classic move by Trump for sure. So,
and one other thing to add to that too is I just hope, let's say that Trump gets elected, he puts RFK in a cabinet position in a health, something to do with health. I just hope that my fear is that it's like, well, I'm going to mandate this no, I would want him to be out in front of television cameras all the time saying, these are, the food pyramid is crap, and then here's what it looks like is causing the health problem. Maybe stay away from these things. Because the one thing that his vice presidential candidate with him brought up was that when they grow wheat, used to, they didn't spray anything on it. Now they spray a desiccant on the wheat so that it completely dries and it can be harvested, because if it gets wet after a certain point, it's no good. And they're thinking the desiccant that they spray on the wheat is what's causing people to be gluten intolerant and a myriad of other health factors. It's literally just the stuff they spray on the wheat to dry it out before they harvest it.
Well, they say that a lot of the pasta and things made of wheat and the bread over in Italy and a lot of places in Europe where they don't spray that kind of stuff on there, where they don't use pesticides and they don't spray that, I can't remember what you just said, but they don't spray that kind of stuff on there, and yeah, the bread and the pasta doesn't make them as fat and as sick as it does us. Like, our carbs do more damage to our body than European carbs do to their body. There's a reason for it. It's, there's obviously something going on there for sure. And I thought it was funny how you mentioned the food pyramid, because I went to, when I was in elementary school, 15, I guess that was not elementary school, 20 years ago, I was in elementary school. And the food pyramid has completely flipped since then. And that was just 20 years ago. That wasn't like we didn't have scientists doing studies back then. There was, they could have known that the grains and that eating a bunch of carbs is not like at the base of your food pyramid. Maybe that's not the way to go. Now a bunch of people are on keto, eating like 30 carbs a day max, realizing that that's the healthier way to do it, losing weight and reducing their, health risks.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of health, let's get into this one first, because last week I was dog tired, just like I am tonight. Brandon and I were talking before the show. I said, Brandon, if you hadn't been coming on, I had taken a week off. I knew Brandon was coming back. I'm like, all right, let's do the show. So last week, and it's a good thing I covered this DHSS story first, because it really got me amped up to get through the rest of the show because I was so angry. Well, the DHSS looks like they're backing down a little bit, and they're going after more of the edible stuff and leaving the beverages alone. Now, one thing that I don't remember if I said, I think I mentioned it, but the guy that runs that post said, when DHSS was there, he's like, listen, this is veterans of foreign wars. We have no child members. And if this whole campaign that you've kicked off, or that actually Parson kicked off, is about saving the children, what are you doing here? Because we don't have kids going to war. We don't have 7-year-olds going to war coming in here buying and drinking hemp beverages. So what are you doing? And I hope that this stays in the limelight. I hope they keep going after DHSS. I hope they keep hammering Parson, because I haven't really seen anything from Parson on this. No, I haven't seen an apology. Now, it might be out there. I haven't seen it. So I don't think Parson's apologized. Of course, it's his last, he's in his last few months of his governorship, so he's not going to come out and apologize, because he's not running for any political office, so he doesn't care. But again, and Brandon, I know you got a lot to say about this, but picking 9/11 to go to a VFW hall to embargo hemp beverages is, I mean, the government does a lot of ridiculous things, and this ranks right up there near the top on the wrong place, the wrong time type of stuff. Like, what are you doing right now? So I thought that was, I don't know. It was interesting. It infuriated me, and I know it infuriated a lot of other people. And again, I'll say this. Whoever showed up there to do that, at the least, should be fired. At the most, serve a little jail time. Because you took someone's natural rights, and again, to do that to vets, you go to a VFW hall and you're doing that under the guise of protecting the children, bro. You ought to go serve 90 days of shock time at least in a county jail, just to shake you out of the coma that you're in. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the problem with that is if you send him to the jail for 90 days, the taxpayers are going to end up paying for his meal and lodging for 90 days. So True. I don't want to do that. I think it's interesting. Well, you bring up that he did it on 9/11, and the younger generation now more associates 9/11 with having your rights taken away. Like, we acknowledge that 9/11 is what caused the Patriot Act, which was a grave infringement, just a continuing infringement on people's rights. And so, yeah, we associate a day of rights being taken away with you coming after more people's rights to just live their life and do it however they want. And Parsons is never going to apologize, because he's always going to fall back on that guise of, I was doing it to save the children. I was going into the VFW halls and taking away a hemp drink from an injured veteran for the children.
The children.
So yeah. So good luck ever getting an apology from him. But no, I just think it's so dumb. There's the places that they're going in and tackling, even if you are selling THC products that taste like Skittles or that look like gummy worms, adults want those things too. So if you, at worst, just slap a bigger label on it that says not for kids, but to just go after them and try to get them to basically, like you were saying on shows before, you're funneling the business into the dispensaries because that's where all of Parsons' friends are. And it's good to see that the DHSS is kind of, I don't like this, though, because it still gives them the leeway to come in and shut things down. I used to be a Juul Pod smoker, but then they kept getting rid of all of the Juul Pod flavors. You could still go to a vape store and buy watermelon, mango, kiwi, raspberry flavored vapes if you wanted to, but you couldn't get a mint Juul Pod from the gas station. And so, I mean, I'm just afraid they're going to use this, guys, to go after other things, especially if you just make a precedent where if things look like, if you just make an argument that we're doing it for the kids, that you can get away with whatever you want, it's a bad precedent for sure. So, I mean, the whole thing is dumb. It reeks of corruption. And, it just goes to show you that there are no heroes in politics.
No, there's definitely no heroes in politics. And again, it's really guts. Okay, let's just say the right word. It's a really ballsy move on their part. It really was. Whoa, what are we doing here? Why did it do that? You almost have to be, I'm going to say this, people are going to take this the wrong way, and that's fine. You almost have to be retarded to fall for that. Yeah, I mean, you to sit here and not think about the day you're doing it on. Like, did you get up, not look at a calendar or anything? You just went, oh, today's the day I'm going to there's no way you looked at a calendar. No way. Now, from my understanding, somebody that I talked to said they got an anonymous tip. From who? Yeah, I don't see a vet narking out other vets about a hemp beverage. I don't see a veteran going to DHSS and turning in their VFW post about a hemp beverage, but supposedly they got an anonymous tip, and I guess that was good enough.
I'm going to go in on anonymous tippers for just a second. Like, if you're an anonymous tipper and you're blowing the whistle against the government, good for you. I will be in your corner forever, because it takes courage to, like, risk your job and risk your livelihood to fight against corrupt government power. Great. But if you're the kind of whistleblower who blows the whistle on hemp beverages at the VFW hall, or the guy who was in right outside of New Haven, Missouri, who was trying to sell green beans and pickles to his neighbors, but someone on Facebook whistle blew him to, like, the
probably health department.
The health department, and they said that you have to have a separate facility if you want to sell any vegetables like that. He was just trying to sell green beans and pickles to his friends on Facebook, and someone blew the whistle. Or like you'll see a 6-year-old girl selling lemonade, and someone will blow the whistle on a little girl selling lemonade. I mean, sure, business taxes are ridiculous, business license and fees and all that. So I understand, like, you're trying to run a business, but if you're calling on a little girl selling lemonade, or someone drinking hemp, or someone selling pickles to their neighbors, and the funny thing about the selling pickles to their neighbors thing, he had insurance, where if someone would have gotten sick from eating the pickles or the green beans, he was still covered. So it wasn't a liability thing. It was simply just the government stepping in and saying, we're only allowing the companies who can afford to have separate facilities ran that go through their own separate inspections. Only those people can sell pickles and green beans. Have fun eating your green beans and pickles covered in food coloring and pesticides, while your neighbor enjoys a longer, healthier life because his are all natural pickles. I don't know, whistleblower. Unless you're blowing a whistle against the government, just keep your mouth shut. Why do you care? You think the government's going to come in, get involved, and make things better for you? They're not. Sorry, rant over.
No,
Just had to get that in.
You're absolutely right. It is. People just. I sometimes I wonder. It's like people want to lord over other people, and or they think they're doing the right thing because I don't know how you could think you're doing the right thing by turning your neighbor in for selling green beans and pickles, out in his front yard. I don't know how you can think that you're doing society a favor to oh, well, I'm protecting people from the green bean monster. Like, what? The Jolly Green Giant's going to attack your home if you buy green beans from this guy. Like, no. Our local farmers market, somebody was selling honey, and the health department guy. We've had farmers markets here for years, and health department doesn't even show up. And this new guy that they got, he must have been on an ego trip. He shows up. Somebody was selling honey, and it didn't have the right labels. They told him get out. Health department guys like, pack your stuff and go. That's not labeled correctly. It's honey. I mean, if you looked at it and it's like, and you open a jar and it smells like urine, like somebody just made urine into gel and it's passing it off as honey. What's going on here? But
well, also, if you were selling bad honey, the market would correct you in 5 minutes. Everyone would go, "Oh, did you taste Mike's honey from the farmer's market? It's terrible. Shouldn't buy it. Tastes gross. I think there's something wrong with it."
Right. Or somebody gets sick. Right. Somebody gets sick, and then they're like, ugh.
Right. Then they'll either sue him for making them sick and send them to the hospital and selling him bad honey, or the word of mouth will just spread to where that person doesn't sell honey anymore. You don't need a government agency coming in and cracking down on a bunch of people and all the government agencies are doing is making people pack their stuff full of more preservatives and things that are not good for your body.
Well, and not to mention the fact, too, that just because a label's on there, it's like the label keeps you from getting sick. Like, oh, he didn't have a label on the bottle. The label must be like antibacterial or something because this unlabeled bottle got me sick, or this properly labeled bottle didn't get me sick, and the improperly labeled bottle, oh, I felt like crap for 3 days after I ate that. I keep making this point, Brandon, and I know you've heard me say this a million times, but just because someone has a license or the proper label doesn't automatically mean they're a good person.
Well, and here's another example for what you're like. My fiance, when she was pregnant, couldn't have raw honey. Like, you have to have, it just can't be raw. I don't know how they cook it or whatever, but it just couldn't be raw. And if we go to the store and none of the honey or the honey that we wanted wasn't labeled raw, we just wouldn't buy it. Like, if the label's wrong on it, don't make them not sell the honey. Just don't buy it. I don't know. Anyway, sorry. Go on.
No, you're good. I completely agree. It is absolutely ridiculous that this goes on. And again, another alphabet agency, Department of Health, going around, well, we got to inspect these businesses. They inspect every restaurant to make sure. But it's like, and you just said it, okay, well, if I open a restaurant and I improperly cook food and I get sick, people are going to sue me out of existence. And the health department is not going to keep. Especially if I know the health department's due to come, I can go and scrub and everything, make it look good. Health department leaves, I go right back to my old ways.
Well, and I have worked in basically exclusively restaurants my entire working tenure, and the health department themselves are not very stringent. In fact, most of the places that I've worked, especially corporate restaurants, they have private companies that are way more stringent than the health inspectors, come in and inspect all their restaurants more frequently than the health inspector will. And so that's another example of like a private industry. You would call it like John's restaurant inspection. And people like the one that the big popular one for corporate restaurants is called StairTech. And you could just advertise that your company is like, we are StairTech A+ certified. It's kind of like the Better Business Bureau. The Better Business Bureau is not a government agency. You pay money to it, and they give you a rating. And and I actually appreciate that. I mean, if I'm wrong and the BBB is funded by the government in some way, I apologize. But the theory behind the BBB is, or Angie's List, is that if you've got a problem with a company, you can post about it. It's the word of mouth, like, this company's bad. You don't need a government agency doing that. The private sector could do that as effectively. And then instead of us paying for these restaurants to be inspected, the restaurants will pay for it themselves because they want to be known as the clean restaurant that everyone wants to go to. It's a way of getting a leg up on the competition. So they'll be like, we're StairTech certified or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know. I've never met a person, unless they're joking. Okay, it might be a joke. I've never met a person who says, I want to open up a restaurant and I want to set a record for the most people made sick by one dish. Like, I've never heard anybody say that. I don't know of anybody who would take their capital, open up a restaurant, risk everything to have a good restaurant and go, you know what, we're just not going to clean. We'll let roaches run all over the place, and we'll just cross our fingers that people don't get sick. Not unless you're completely idiotic. No, you won't. You want to. Most business people want to be successful. They want to make more money, maybe have a chain someday or multiple locations. They're not looking to go out and set a record for food poisoning in one weekend. So I hate the fact that people think that if, like you said, and I just looked it up, the Better Business Bureau is it's a non-profit organization. They are in no way tied to any government agency. So you were correct on that. I just wanted to verify that because I'm like, he just brought up a really good question. I better, because we don't want to come on here and say the wrong thing and then just gloss over. Like if we're wrong, we want to correct it so people don't think we're just on here like blowing
and the
smoke
live
up there.
chat too. If you're in the live chat, feel free to fact check us live. We appreciate it. Send us the link too. We'll read it on air.
You just bring up something that I haven't said on this show in a long time, and I need to say it again. That I want, if you find this show by accident or whatever, if you just started listening to the show and you're hearing stuff and you're like, well, I don't know. I don't expect you to listen to this show and take everything I say as the gospel and say, well, John said it, it must be right. No, I want to give you information. I want you to come to your own conclusion, and I want you to research it as well to find out if you're coming to the same conclusion I am. I don't want anything I say on here to be taken as the absolute truth, that I am infallible, and that that I'm just the all-knowing. That is not the case. I just want people to think for themselves and come to their own conclusions, and we can have we can have disagreements on certain topics. That's great. If you go out and put in the work to research and do your own thinking, I will have more respect for you than a person who just goes, well, John said it, it must be right. If you knew me for a long time, you know how wrong I've been several times in my life. So please don't see me as some basically know-it-all. And, now, don't get me wrong. Some people come at me, and we're generally think alike. And somebody will say something. Now, if I have what I believe to be facts that contradict that, I will stick it in. I'll be like, hey, you might want to double-check this because this is what I saw. Or if somebody says, well, this is what I saw. Okay, well, I'll go check that out because maybe I'm wrong. There's that back and forth there. And that is way more enjoyable than to just have a conversation with someone all the time and they're nodding their head, yes. And there's no dialogue to where two people come to a slightly different conclusion and you can hash it out. That is way more enjoyable to me, that type of human interaction, than just have people almost clapping and nodding their heads like zombies. I don't mind talking to like-minded people, but I love it when someone has a different set of facts than I do, and they're putting them in there, and I go, oh, hey, that's kind of interesting. I hadn't thought of it that way, and it leads me down a different road. I love that.
Wait, so we're not trying to start a cult here? I thought we were trying to start a cult this whole time. Wait. I've been wasting my time for the last 6 months. What?
Neither one of us are Donald Trump or Kamala Harris, so no, we're definitely not trying to start a cult. I would say, though, I would probably make a pretty horrible cult leader, because somebody would kind of be like, what do I do about this? And like, I don't know, bro, figure it out. I'm not trying to be some kind of god.
We wanted you to answer all the questions for us.
But
you're supposed to be our government.
Yeah, you're supposed to be our god. Like, clearly I'm not. So you might just, the cult would be over in a month, because I get tired of people asking me stupid questions and be like, listen, man, I was trying to start a anti-government cult where we all just kind of did our own thing and no one was the quote-unquote leader. I'm just trying to get people together that hate the state as much as I do, and we can just do our own thing and be a little more free. I don't need the, hey, you're semi-Jesus. No, I'm not. So please just go home. Go back to the government side of the fence, because clearly you're not mentally all there. But yeah, this whole DHSS thing, I'm glad that because this didn't come from this came from DHSS. They're like, okay, we're gonna back off this thing and we're gonna focus in a new direction. Now, let's think about this for a minute. Let's do a little social experiment here, I guess you'd call it, maybe. What happens if that guy at the VFW hall doesn't know all the laws? What if he's as clueless as just somebody brought these beverages to him and said, hey, would you be willing to sell these here? And he's like, sure. And, the guy selling making the beverage lays everything out as what's in the product, what it does, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, oh, great. And DHSS shows up and says we have to embargo these things, and that guy doesn't know any better. This whole thing might have been just barely anybody notice, except for a couple of people, and then they just proceed to keep going until they're pressed.
I tell you what, if Ashcroft would have gone along with this, like if for some reason, if somehow Parson, after not endorsing him for governor, would have been able to corral him onto his team to get this done, then we might not have heard much a fuss about it. Then there might not have been hardly any pushback at all. You would have probably heard a story on the news about it, but the DHSS wouldn't have came out and basically said that they're not going after products just because they're labeled THC. You would have seen full compliance across the board, and you would have seen all the Republicans in lockstep back it, because the two people at the top said it. I don't want to lose my position. I could be next in line for Missouri State Speaker of the House. How could I jeopardize that by speaking out against government corruption? So, yeah, I think that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, and when you say that, it just reminds me of that conversation we had with Bryant Wolfen a few weeks ago, talking about how he had speed dating with what you just said. People, and we cover some state issues. We cover a lot of federal issues on this show. But people got to come to an understanding. They think that a lot of this mess just goes on in D.C. Think again. There's a whole bunch of crooked crap right here. Every state house across the country is just embroiled with this, because the national, the Republican and Democrat Party at the national level have 50 state puppet entities, and they're all in lockstep. And you better be in lockstep with this group above this group above this group, or we're going to make sure you don't win your next election. So take that away from this.
Well, that's the pipeline. That's where the national Republicans come from, is the pipeline of the state Republicans. And so if you've got state Republican, if you've got, not Republicans, but Democrats and Republicans, when you have state legislatures that will go and do the dog and pony show for the lobbyists at the state level, for sure they're going to do it at the federal level. The stakes are higher and the money is way better.
Oh,
they're going to, exactly. So if you think that if they're going to sell themselves out for $3,000 in lobbyist money from Purina Farms or from Boeing, they're for sure going to sell themselves out for $150,000, $200,000 from the banking industry, $200,000 from the arms industry, $200,000 from the healthcare industry. Yeah, they're taking all of it for sure. I mean, to think that they're not is just, at this point with the internet in 2024, if you can't figure out that the most politicians at the national level are are a joke, then that's on you.
Yeah, and that's another good point is that these people, as George Carlin said so eloquently, these people don't pass through a membrane and pow there and they're in some elected office. He's like, they come from American homes and American churches and American businesses and American college. These people don't fall out of the sky. There's a track record there. Most of them were proven to take a boatload of lobbyist money in their lower elected positions. And so, of course, the big boys see it as, oh, this guy's easily bought. Yeah, we're going to fund him, get him elected so we can continue to buy him here in Washington, D.C. So, but I do hear, and I know you see this too, Brandon, the majority of people focus on the federal side. They don't look at the state as being quite as corrupt. Now, I have been on, you've heard me say this on this show a lot, that I think your local area is the most important, then your state, and then the federal. As far as fighting for liberty, local, state, federal. But I was having a conversation with my friend Sam Matrish the other night, and I said, generally, I encourage local. But at this time, if we don't get the government, this government doesn't stop fighting proxy wars, and I don't want to come on here and push this fear porn, but people got to realize we have Whiteman's Air Force Base. We have missile silos and stuff in this state. If our government is hell-bent on playing chicken with another nuclear power, seemingly like they don't care, all the freedom in the world ain't going to mean a squat if nuclear missiles start getting launched, because Missouri's going to be a crater. They will get hit hard. People think, they don't think of Missouri, but yeah, between Whiteman's Air Force Base, St. Louis, northern Missouri towards Kansas City, there's nuclear missiles in the ground. They're going to hit us. And at this point in our nation and the politics right now, I feel like if we don't get this, especially this Russia-Ukraine thing done and over with, and get some kind of compromise done, we could have gold and silver. We could have all these things. Ain't going to matter so much if all the trees are, everything around you is turned to ash and there's nuclear fallout. And again, I'm not trying to be like, oh, I'm not saying there's a nuclear war coming, but we are playing chicken with a nuclear superpower.
Well, I was actually watching a thing by Scott Horton the other day. He is, I think it might have been at the New Hampshire Free State Festival that they had, I don't know if it was Pork Fest or something, but he was giving a speech and is sort of outlining his new book, Provoked, which is how the United States got us into the new Cold War. He was outlining how basically you were talking about how there is the nuclear threat that's there that literally affects the entire planet. And after Reagan, it was really George W. Bush. He started bringing he brought like 9 people into NATO, 9 new countries into NATO. And there was a treaty that basically said that we won't put anything that can launch missiles into Russia. So all we said that we were going to do in Europe was set up these these defense missile systems that are basically only launch anti-defense missiles. But the launchers that we put in are capable of shooting Tomahawk missiles that you can tip with a hydrogen bomb. So what we've done is basically went right behind reneged on our deal that we had under Reagan, and George Bush put in a bunch of missile launchers that are capable of shooting Tomahawk missiles, and the Russians have there's no governing body that comes in and inspects these launchers to make sure they're not topped with missiles, and they're all over Europe. And so that is one of the biggest hidden escalations that people don't know about, is that we basically lined Europe with a bunch of launchers capable of hitting Russia with nukes. And that was what the Reagan's big deal in the 80s was, is that we were going to get rid of the launchers in Europe. We're getting rid of the launchers, Russia's launchers all across the world, and we're going to de-escalate by not giving either person the ability to do this. And what Russia, so everyone thinks that because Russia has nukes, that there's this mutually assured destruction, that since they have it, they won't launch because we won't launch any of that. But what Russia's afraid of, and what Putin was afraid of, especially back then when George Bush did this, is he's afraid that America thinks that they can strike first with and then deal with the consequences. Basically, that we'll hit them first with nukes, wipe out their country, and they won't have the ability to shoot back at us. And if you think that is the case, you're forgetting that Russians could have submarines in the ocean all around us. We don't know for sure that they don't. They could have missiles lined up at us all the time. And so to play the game of where we're going to put these missile launchers in Europe, hoping that we don't anger Vladimir Putin enough where we can surround him and blow him up. I mean, the whole thing is a ticking time bomb that that we have missile launchers capable of shooting nukes at Russia in Europe right now.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me of one of my favorite movies, and I don't watch a whole lot of movies, but one of my favorite movies ever is The Hunt for Red October. And it's the U.S. the U.S. ambassador's talking to the Russian ambassador or something. And he goes, "It is dangerous for our submarines and your submarines and your aircraft carriers and our aircraft carriers being in such close proximity." He's like, "Wars have begun that way, Mr. Ambassador." So, yes, the Russians probably got submarines that are kind of close, and we have subs that are actively keeping track of them, and one wrong move, and you started a war. And then on top of that, you have us lining Russia's border with NATO countries and then trying to bring Ukraine in after, you know, running a coup operation and installing a stand-up comedian as president. And then doing everything you said, and now Blinken's wanting to give the green light for these shadow missile systems to strike deep into Russian territory. And Putin has openly said, if they do this, Ukraine can't do this on their own. This is Western and NATO countries using their satellites to pinpoint targets for that missile system, and there will be consequences. So he said that on Russian TV when being interviewed. And again, how many people are, besides people who are anti-war or maybe just really into foreign policy, the majority of Americans, they don't understand any of this. They're looking at P. Diddy, or they're looking at, oh, Kamala said this, which, again, she's dumber than a box of dirt. I mean, she's about as sharp as a bag of wet hair. I'm not saying she's not. But people are looking at that. They're fixated on that. The P. Diddy story, these other stories, the second attempt on Trump, all these things, and we're toying with a nuclear superpower. And I just think right now that is the most important thing that we need to lay out to the public, make them aware, and I don't know if you can pressure D.C. enough to say, hey, if all you idiots don't want to back us away from these proxy wars, we'll all stay home and nobody's going to vote. That'll never happen. But we can apply some pressure and get more media coverage, get this information out there. It is a plus. But yeah, I do want to keep up on stuff here in Missouri. I'm not going to just say, well, I'm done talking about Missouri topics. I'm only talking about federal topics. That's not the case. I'm just saying, to me, this is the story right now. This is the thing to keep track of. Now, moving from Ukraine, because, pagers in this country, they're kind of a thing of the past. But apparently in Israeli Mossad hands or whatever, they can be turned into explosives and just blow people up willy-nilly that are apparently connected to Hamas or what have you. But I've seen videos. I saw a video that, now I couldn't say that it was accurate or that's what actually happened or if it was something else. Somebody posted a video of a dude sitting down in a cafe and boom, and he's laying on the floor and he's screaming and crying and stuff, and it's like a something blew up on him. I'm assuming a pager. But it's like, here we go. We're just, if we, again, can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. Well, what if these people are around a bunch of innocent civilians?
It was so indiscriminate that you couldn't. They had no idea who these people were going to be around. And I was talking about this because someone was trying to say that, gave this argument that, well, when you're being shot at, you don't have time to figure out who's shooting at you. They created explosive devices out of pagers and then shipped them in. They had time. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were trying to cause as much chaos and harm as possible because they were coming in with airstrikes later that night, which militarily was a good strategy. But you hit a bunch of innocent civilians. Like, you didn't just strike Hezbollah. It's the most frustrating part of the whole conflict, is that there are no good guys. I'm not rooting for either one to take over the land and win. I'm wishing for both people to just stop shooting. And this is Ben Shapiro had some video he had a clip on his show where he was talking about how this was the most precise strike that Israel's committed in a long time, that this was precision onto Hezbollah. They killed 30 people. So they injured thousands of people, but they only killed, I think, 30 people with these pager bombs, and 2 of them were children, which means 1 out of every 15 people you killed was a child. So multiply that by the number of people you've hurt. You've hurt hundreds of kids. And I know that you're a father. I just became a father. And if someone hurt my kid, that would immediately radicalize me to go harm whoever hurt my child as fast and immediately as I could. So if you're doing terrorist math, which means you may have killed, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. They killed 28 Hezbollah terrorists and injured 2 children. You've at least created probably 5 to 10 new terrorists out of that alone. So even if you were precision striking everyone else and only killed the 2 innocent civilians, everyone in that person's family, all of their brothers and sisters, their dad, all of the people who were affected by that child dying has now been so radicalized that they're going to go and fight for a terrorist organization, or they're going to go fight for Hezbollah because they're so angry. I mean, we have propaganda in America. So could you imagine if you're in Lebanon, all you're hearing is Hezbollah propaganda, and then your kid gets hurt by the force that you've been told your whole life is evil? You'd be so ready to go fight and so ready to go cause harm to that other side that it wouldn't matter what was right or wrong anymore. And that's the worst part of this, is that they're creating generational conflicts from this. Like, every time you kill someone now, an innocent person now, that's generations of people angry at you, plotting revenge. So Israel has done themselves way more harm than good with all of their latest terrorist attacks, and not terrorists, but all of their attacks on the supposed terrorists that they're harming. Every time they hurt a civilian, it only hurts their cause.
When you're just saying that, it brings up the book that I'm like 38% through it, Fool's Errand: Time to End the War in Afghanistan. There was the northern part of Afghanistan. There was this big agricultural area there, and they bring in these Marines, and it's stated multiple times in the book. Every time they do something in an area that had nothing to do with, there was no Al-Qaeda, no Taliban, anything. All they did was create insurgents. They just kept creating thousands and hundreds upon thousands of insurgents every time they did anything. I was unaware of something, that when the British sent troops down there, and I was unaware, and that's on me, of the bad blood between Afghanistan and Britain. So Britain, the U.S. pressed Britain to send troops in. They pull in there. These people see British troops, instantly causes hostility, because there's been such bad blood between that Middle Eastern region and the Brits for decades. So it immediately caused hostility just by placing them in that country. People were PO'd at the drop of a hat. And so you're talking about creating recruits. And That's something that our government doesn't seem to be able to grasp, and it seems a lot of other government, the government of Israel, also doesn't grasp this, or they want sometimes it seems they want this struggle to continue because they want the world's pity. And at some point, they'll aggravate them enough to attack in such a way where a bunch of nations go, just wipe everybody off the face of the earth. It's like, that's what they're pushing for. They want this. They want a full, just genocidal strike and just say, screw it, just wipe them all out, and we'll take all the land, and everything will be kittens and rainbows after that. I don't know what other justification or reasoning you could have for continuing a policy that continually creates more enemies. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, again, I'm not in the Department of Defense. I'm not an ambassador. I'm not a archaeologist or something where I study past cultures. I read things from people who are really good on foreign policy. I'm looking at this stuff, and I'm like, well, yeah, when you lay it out, it makes sense why these people are so angry at us and we continually causing more insurgent strikes. Duh. When you look at the facts, these people see the same data. They see the same data we're seeing, and they just look at it in a completely different light. In our case, we just didn't have enough time and enough troops. That was always the excuse. In this book so far, these people, the Petraeuses, the McChrystals, all these people, we just didn't have enough troops and enough time. Instead of a surge of 40,000 troops, it should have been 68,000. Yeah, sure, place more troops in to create a bigger insurgency, and I'm sure that'll work out just fine.
Has he brought up? I'm sure he's probably brought up in the book, because I'm pretty sure it's also in his other book, Enough Already. But he said that you would need something like 200,000 troops or some obscene number. You would need like an obscene number of troops to be there for like 30 more years. And then you could possibly see the Afghani government creating a sustainable, the Afghani people creating a sustainable democracy to fight off the Taliban. Because we were there for 2 years, spent $3 trillion, had, like you said, upwards of 50 to 100,000 troops there at any given time over 20 years. And the Taliban took it back over in a day. So if that's the kind of effort it takes for the Taliban to just come in overnight and reclaim everything we built over 20 years, you would need to quadruple that effort and double the troop presence or over time or whatever. And it's unfeasible the amount of time it would have taken to successfully create a democracy, which is why, that probably wouldn't even have worked to begin with. Like, that was just what some estimates were saying if we were going to try to build a democracy in Afghanistan, which just goes to show you that all of the democracy building efforts over the Middle East have all came to very similar conclusions.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing, which I was not aware of, I didn't know the percentage, that Afghanistan exports 90% of the world's opiate drugs, so basically heroin. 90% of the world's heroin comes from Afghanistan. And because there were so many corrupt people over there who were in the drug trade, that there were U.S. troops standing around poppy fields protecting them. And then our government over here is like, we got to end the war on drugs. We got to fight this heroin scourge. And then we have troops in another country because those people were friends of the CIA, or they were supposed to be helping build a new government in Afghanistan, corrupt as all get out, big time fields of poppy. And what do? We protect the fields. The more you read, the more you sit there. And now, I had seen pictures for years. Certain people would say, oh, yes, look at us fighting for freedom and democracy in another country. And there's just a line of troops in a box around a poppy field. Not burning them, but protecting them. And we sent them billions of dollars to destroy their poppy fields. But because now Russia at one point had destroyed so much agricultural land indiscriminately, they went to poppy And yes, there's taxes on it charged by the Taliban, Al-Qaeda. They gladly pay it because they're making money and they have a crop that's selling well. And then those, then they turn some of these farmers into government officials, and they're still running their poppy operation, turning into heroin and selling it. And we're paying them to burn the fields. They're not burning them. They're still growing them. And they were giving it's like we were trying to create a government over there that mimics the government we have here. Just corrupt people top to bottom. And they're like, oh, okay, you guys handle it now. And like you just stated, we knew there were a lot of people saying there's no way on God's green earth that this government in this amount of time will ever be sustainable. They don't have the infrastructure for roads, this, that, and the other. There's no way we're going to create a sustainable government. We're going to leave, and it's going to fall to pieces. 2 months after we're gone, it's going to be destroyed. And you know what? They were right. But we just didn't spend enough money, and we just didn't send enough soldiers.
And this was right after. This was 10 years after Russia had just done the exact same thing. Like the State Department and the people in the White House were bragging that we're about to give Russia their own Vietnam in Afghanistan. So we funded the freedom fighters in Afghanistan, or not I can't remember what they're called, but we funded Bin Laden's group before it was the Taliban, or before he was Al-Qaeda, when we funded his group in Afghanistan, and then went right in after him and stayed there for 20 years and spent $2 trillion right after that. I mean, It's unbelievable.
It's like Hitler not learning from oh my God, what was his name? Who also went into Russia and it was cold as heck? Napoleon. The Germans didn't learn anything from Napoleon. He marched into Russia, cold as crap, gets run out. They're like, oh, we can do better. We're smarter than Napoleon. Nope, that didn't end well either. Yeah, we turned around and pulled we did our own version of Germany and Napoleon, not learning from what Russia went through, and we just think that I don't know, the arrogance and the ego of these people to think, well, we can do better than Russia. They're pounding their chest. We're better than Russia. We're smarter than them. We have a better military. Well, clearly you don't, because like you said, 20 years and $2 or $3 trillion later, and they took it right back over, and we left all that equipment to just sit there for them to take. It almost seems like that was I don't know. That almost seems like you're doing that on purpose. So you do all that, you leave this stuff there, they take it, now you're creating a destabilized area that maybe you go right back in and fight another war 20, 30 years down the road.
It wasn't that. It was that if they would have brought home all those vehicles, then the weapons manufacturers in America wouldn't have been able to make new ones.
There's
they
that
left
too.
Them there. They left them there because they couldn't reuse them. And so the government was just going to make a whole bunch of new ones.
Jesus.
That's true. Yeah. But I was just going to say that it's America also had a very similar so when the Soviet Union collapsed and they were basically everything was communism. So everything was owned by the government. So they were divested. The government was divesting. And basically the Americans went in there and helped them rig it where a bunch of like 5 or 6 different people ended up owning every industry in Russia. They owned like all the oil, all the coal, all of the energy production, and now those people basically stripped it and sold it, and all live in different parts of the world, like in Florida and New York and in Israel. So after the fall of communism from the Soviet Union, we went in there and gave them an American-style capitalism where we funneled all of the money straight to a few people at the top, and then they bankrupted the country. It's like upwards of, I think it was over, it's in the millions, the number of excess deaths. So it's not like direct conflict from the fall of the Soviet Union and the way that the oligarchs, but even in the 90s, as late as the 90s, there was millions of excess deaths based on just like economic downturn, lack of good, clean resources that was caused in part by the United States helping end communism. And I'm not, obviously, you're not going to get me to sit here and preach anything good about communism, but it just goes to show you that when the Americans try to implement their version of democracy overseas, it never works. It has to be done by America's so great because it was a revolution done by the people, because it was a bunch of people who wanted to become individualists, not just some rallying cry around a flag.
Yeah, the spreading democracy is like prohibition. It never, ever works. Prohibition's never worked. Spreading democracy through force never works. And again, like I went back to last week, this idea of spreading democracy drives me insane. Not just that, this overuse, or maybe the deliberate use of the word democracy. Because again, I harken back to that podcast I listened to last week. Democracy is full of knaves, fools, and savages, and it comes to a violent end, and it is a suicide pact. Democracies don't ever survive, ever survive. And that's why the founders were so vehemently opposed to that word. They wanted a constitutional republic. Now, I believe Jefferson said it's a republic as long as you can keep it. But any country that hears the United States saying we want to come in and create a democracy should run the other direction. Like, go create your suicide pact somewhere else.
No, democracy just means you can take my rights away as long as you have majority support, as long as people agree with you. No, you're 100% right. And another point to kind of bring up there is when people celebrate the 4th of July, they should be celebrating Independence Day. Like, all of this talk of patriotism, I love this country. I do. I like my community. I love the people. I'm not saying I don't love this country. And in that very generic term, I guess I would consider myself patriotic. But to be patriotic is to worship the state, like of any state. And that is not what the founding fathers intended. That is the opposite of what Independence Day is. It is a separation of it is a celebration of the independence of man. It's what the Bill of Rights stands for to this day. It applies to the individual, which is the smallest minority on the planet. So all these leftists who want to stand up for the minority, stand up for the individual. And don't just blindly worship this government. Like, I just don't like the term that, like, if you talk bad about the government, it makes you not patriotic. Like, if you have to support these things or you're not a patriot. And it's the patriots back in the day were fighting the government. That's what a patriot was. So get out of here with that. With trying to, the Republicans are worse than anybody about shaming people for not being patriotic. It's like the most patriotic thing you can do is be very leery of your government.
I have almost every year, if I do a show, which generally falls around the 4th of July, Independence Day, I always get on here and I'm telling people, like, if you think this is all about fireworks and stuffing yourselves full of barbecue, you're wrong. Like, take a step back, stop watching the fireworks, put the food down, get on your phone. You got this device that you can just find about any information that you want, and go look up some founders quotes, and then look around you today. And you think you ought to be celebrating this? What we got here? You think this is cause for celebration? It's not. Now, some people, of course, will openly celebrate the state taking someone's natural rights away. They seem to just get some kind of perverse joy out of it. But, yeah, I every year I sit and I look. If you're like, oh, we're going to go see fireworks and we're going to barbecue, I'm like, okay, but don't forget what this is really about. Just don't forget what you're actually supposed to be celebrating, that a bunch of people put their livelihoods and lives on the line so you could have a constitutional republic. And now we have parties that run candidates that seem to be lacking in brain cells, and we're all like, yeah, this America, baby, America. Like that. Jesus.
Yeah, the proper way to celebrate Independence Day would be to go to run a business without a business license. That's the best way to celebrate, is sticking it to the government.
Right. Or getting a group of businesses together and all forming some kind of coalition and saying, yeah, we're not all of us are refusing to pay our business licenses now. How you like that? You gonna come shut us all down, jackwagon? Is that what you're gonna do? We'll have this all over the news. Yeah, that's a heck of a revolution to start. You know, all the businesses and let's say St. Charles said all the businesses came together today and said, yeah, we're not buying business license anymore. Go ahead, shut us all down. You'll ruin the economy of the city. Good luck. Just be great.
What I think. So I actually had my real estate license for a little while, and I was 1099, so I didn't pay any taxes until the end of the year. I don't understand why everybody doesn't have that option. That's so crazy to me that everyone in the country basically who's not self-employed is on a W-2, which means the government gets to come in and take your money, whether or not they're providing the services that they promise to provide to you, or the protections of your rights that they offer you. You have to pay them blindly. I actually want to start a push in Missouri to where everybody can basically become 1099, and you can still get a paycheck from your employer, but you can just basically defer your taxes to the end of the year. I don't know why, because you could invest that money and then pay the same amount of money at the end of the year, and instead of the government getting to collect it and invest it or whatever, they, not invest it, waste it, pour it down the drain, basically. We should be able to take the whole of our paycheck and pay the government whenever we are ready to pay it. I think I want to make a push in Missouri where legislators should at least, I think there's probably someone we could find to write that bill and put it on the floor.
Yeah, I know. Excuse me. There's organizations out there that are pushing for a taxpayers' bill of rights. And sometimes built into that, some kind of legislation like that, is that every few years, like say every 3 years, the state and the people, so representatives have to review all the taxes. And then the people could vote whether to keep that tax instituted or not. So you say you have some obscure tax, and it's like, we clearly, now I think we don't need majority of the taxes, maybe all of them. But let's say you could knock a few out that are completely useless. They don't fund what they're supposed to fund. It's just a total just BS scam. And the people go, yep, we don't want that tax anymore. And they vote on it, and it's gone. And they vote, nope, we don't need this tax. And it goes out the window. Someone was, a couple few years ago, was... now, he became a congressman, but he was originally a state senator, I believe. He said when he left his last week there, he goes, I wish somebody would propose legislation in this state that said the body has to review all taxes and vote whether to continue that tax or not. And he goes, then also give the people the ability to vote. And if a body wants to create some kind of tax, some kind of fee, that after 2 or 3 years it's sunshine. It's not on a continuous loop. That it has to be voted on to continue or not to continue. So you have this match where maybe you get some people putting pressure to say, hey, we don't need this. Clearly, we don't need this tax anymore. But it gives the people more input. It gives the people a little more power into how many taxes they're paying, what taxes they're paying, how much they're paying. Maybe they get to eliminate a few of these. I think it may not be the ultimate goal, but it's a good first step that maybe the people get more input. Because right now, the only thing protecting people really on taxes is the Hancock Amendment. That if it's above 10 cents, what is it? Especially on gasoline, it can't be more than so much at one whack, and if it has to go to the vote of the people. Now, of course, the people voted down the gas tax 3 freaking times, and the cowardice legislators and traitors decided to do it themselves and skirt the Hancock Amendment by only doing, 2 cents a year, 2.5 cents a year instead of the full 10 cents that they wanted, which would be the final outcome. So they were cowards, and they were sissies, and they were pansies, and they did it anyway, and traitors, and commies, and a whole bunch of other words that I can't say on the radio, but that's how they did it. And I would love it to where any tax, anytime, if it doesn't come through the vote of the people, you just don't get it. Because at the end of the day, we're the ones who suffer.
I think, speaking to what you were just talking about with the gas tax, it's on Missouri's like the state website. You can find it. It's real easy to Google. Just Google Missouri gas tax refund form. Everyone should fill it out. And even if you're only making 5, because you got to save all your receipts, and it's a little bit of work, but not a ton. You just have to save your receipts, and then you log in your gas tax, and you get that money back for every gallon you spent. But we need as many people as we can to fill out that form and send it in, just so the bureaucrats have to waste all of their time going through all of those. And don't fill it out online, because I'm pretty sure there's an online way you could fill it out. Fill out the handwritten form and mail that sucker in. If they had to do that for 8 million people, they just repealed the tax. There's no way, like, if every single person, if every person who drove in Missouri was filling one of those out and send it in, they would just get rid of the tax. I think everybody should take 5 minutes out of your day, even if you only save a couple of receipts close to the end of the gas tax season. Just save a few receipts, get your $4 back, and send that into the state to make them go through all of the paperwork of dealing with adding in this tax behind our back, and really just kind of stick it to them.
It would be funny, but my fear is that the governor at that time would be like, we need to hire more people from the Department of Revenue to go through all these forms, and they would just grow the Department of Revenue instead of being, I don't know, somewhat intelligent and going, geez, we're not making any money on this. So, like, we need a bigger agency to go through all these forms because people are being jerks and wanting their money back. And that's the thing. Only Missouri citizens can file that. Anybody who lives outside Missouri cannot do that. But the majority of that money is still coming from Missourians. Yeah, it would be great if suddenly they only get 10% of the money they thought they were going to get because everybody filled them out. And they're like, hey, we know this first couple of years we were getting all this money and it's suddenly dried up. What the heck happened? They just walk into some building and it's just boxes upon boxes of gas receipts and people are in there sweating and cursing and drinking heavily. Like, I didn't think all these people are going to do this.
They're chugging Red Bulls, having a meltdown. That'd be great.
Chugging Red Bulls and then taking Quaaludes to like take the edge off so they don't like have a meltdown and go postal on their coworkers. But yeah, this whole thing with the pagers and you know what? And that's the thing. I don't hear any presidential candidate say anything. I haven't heard him say anything about this. It's being largely ignored by the government. Nobody wants to talk about it. Nobody wants to say, hey, this seems to be a different way of committing genocide. What's the deal? Silence. Why?
So
P. Diddy's in the news.
You want to hear the unsung hero of this story? The one person, the singular one person I've seen call this out? AOC. The one person to be like, actually, indiscriminately bombing children is not a good idea. Leave it up to AOC to be the lone voice of reason on this.
Wow.
I know. And you know what's funny? She's actually been pretty flip-floppy on the whole, is it a genocide, is it not a genocide thing? But she actually took a pretty hard stance against the pager attack and was like, you're blowing up kids. You're blowing up whole families. But you're blowing up a bunch of people that had nothing to do with this fight. Definitely. At least it's not to say you can't use Osama bin Laden's excuse for his attack on America for every single person's attack. Like, just because someone in Lebanon would sympathize more with Hezbollah than they would with Israel doesn't make them a terrorist and doesn't mean that they're a target in war. It all, like we were saying earlier, all it's going to do is make them more likely to become a target later, an actual target, someone who's coming after you. Ridiculous.
Yeah, and it reminds me real quick. That reminds me of this book because they were talking about when they sent all these troops into Afghanistan and they were going into these provinces. There was a whole boatload of people. A, didn't even know New York City existed. B, had no idea there was an attack on the Twin Towers. No clue. And we're sending troops into their provinces and into their areas, and they're like, why are you here exactly? Like, oh, have you seen this group of people? They flew planes into the towers, and they're like, what towers where? What New York City, what are you talking about? It's probably just, you say that with, now Lebanon may be a different story, but some of those people would be like, we did what to who? Who did what to who? What? and
Or
then you
they're
blow up a
not on
pager.
that team. They're just
Right.
they're just guys that want to go to work. They want to like sell their bread at the market, take their food and go home and feed their kids. Like that's what they want to do. 99% of the world, that's what they want to do. It's the 1% of the world that wants to lead those people that get everyone else and all of this that causes all this bloodshed. I read it. I don't know. I couldn't. I'm not a genius. I can't quote my sources like some people can, but um, I read that over 1 million people are now dead in the Russia-Ukraine fight. 1 million people. I mean, I just want to know how history is going to look back at this, because we've become so desensitized to all of this death around the world that in 50 years, 100 years, are we going to look back and go, man, can you believe in 2024 they let that go on for that long? Like Zelensky, Putin, Biden, his administration, they let 1 million conscripted people die. I mean, at a certain point, these stories are not political anymore. They're just human stories. They're just like human beings being killed, and it goes beyond like arguing about socialized medicine or socialized retirement programs. Like war and foreign policy, at least to me, takes on a different like level, because you're dealing with so much of greater. I mean, obviously the stakes are great. I'm not saying that, socialized medicine and Social Security and all those other things aren't big issues to talk about, but you're talking like about right now, within 2 years, 1 million young men and women dying in a war over a little strip of land that neither president really cares about. I mean, that's what just hurts so much, is that these stories, they're not. It's not the same as talking about like trivial inconveniences in our lives. You're talking about mass slaughter of human beings in the modern era. It's insane.
Now, I'm on Statista, which I don't know how accurate these are. It says number of civilian casualties in Ukraine during Russia's invasion verified by OHCHR from February 24th, 2022. Now, this goes to July of 2024. It is saying that there are 23,640 civilian casualties. Of them, children, 1,551. Now, that's from now, this is... I'm seeing this number on a lot. Now, it says... Now, the New York Times says troop deaths and injuries in Ukraine war. Really? You want me to be behind a damn paywall, don't you, jackass? Well, it doesn't let me see this, so it's saying 500,000. Radio Free Europe, at least 50,000 Russian military deaths, likely thousands more recorded in Ukraine war. But they're saying Ukraine war casualties near 500,000, and that's from August 18th, 2023.
I'm looking at an article 3 days ago from the Wall Street Journal that says 1 million are now dead or injured.
Okay.
Well, okay, I misread that. You're right. I misread that. It says 1 million are now dead or injured in the Russia-Ukraine war.
Still, 1 million dead or injured over something that we helped perpetuate, something that we helped bring to fruition by going in there and installing a stand-up comic, giving him money and weapons and all this crap, and then lining Russia's border with NATO countries. Now, again, that doesn't give Putin the absolute authority to go in and invade this area of the Ukraine, but our government officials have the audacity to, oh my God, I can't believe he did this. The warning signs have been there for years. They were warned about this continuously from diplomats and ambassadors and people in the Department of Defense and within the CIA. Please don't do this. They did it anyway, and then they have the audacity to act shocked that he decided to send troops in there and invade when he's pretty much said, that's a line. You cross this line. I can't let it go. They've been warned. They did it anyway. And now we have 1 million dead or injured pawns on a chessboard.
Well, it's just so funny, too, because Putin wanted a peace deal where he didn't even want the land in Ukraine. Didn't want it. Just wanted a militarily and economically neutral Ukraine to do business with. And they basically, again, you like you were saying, it's not black and white to say that Putin was or wasn't justified in his invasion of Ukraine. He, like, more likely than not, he probably wasn't if you had to really, break it down. But the Ukrainians, the Western Ukrainians, were bombing the Eastern Ukrainians in the Donbass. They were bombing them. They were shelling them. They were under constant threat from the right sector, which turned into the Azov Battalion, the Nazi group. So, like, the eastern part, the Russian-speaking eastern part of Ukraine was being attacked by the Western Nazi part of Ukraine. So at what point do you not go in there to defend them? I mean, look, again, I'm not defending the invasion, but I'm saying, like, there was cause. And whether it's a good cause or bad cause, there was cause. So for America to act like Putin's about to go take over Europe is the most asinine take that you can have on the issue. No, you could say that this is low-key a fight over resources, that there's, oil and minerals and growable crops growable arable land in Ukraine. And you could say that that's like part of the reason this fight's going on. But then you don't have that political he's trying to take over Europe narrative, and you can go back to the table. You can get to the negotiating table to end the suffering on both sides.
Yeah, it's a no-win situation for either country, and again, they're just using people as cannon fodder. It doesn't impress me at all. All right, so we got a little under a half an hour to go, so I want to play this clip. This is a clip that Jeremy Kaufman, who's kind of big in the Libertarian Party in New Hampshire, just kind of a bigger name in the Libertarian Party. So the Libertarian Party of New Hampshire, they post these memes that really ruffle people's feathers. And basically the post said, whoever shot at Trump had missed. If they'd have hit Kamala, they'd have been a hero. So Jeremy Kaufman gets a visit from two supposed FBI agents. And I'm going to play this audio. I have to bleep it out in one part. He makes them look like complete and utter idiots. It is enjoyable. Let me pull up the display here so you can see, and I'll play this audio for your enjoyment. Let me help if I turn the sound on.
Hey there, Jeremy?
Yeah.
How are you?
Who are you?
I'm Agent O'Donnell with the FBI.
Can you give your full name, please?
I'm Agent O'Donnell with the FBI.
Is that sufficient to identify as the only one O'Donnell affiliated with the FBI?
In New Hampshire, yes.
Could you please state your full name, sir?
Could you please stop recording?
No. It's First Amendment right.
Okay.
What's your name, sir?
Could you stop recording, please?
Absolutely not. You can show me your name and identification, or I'm going to go back inside my house.
Okay. I don't really want to broadcast my...
Oh, this is going out right after you guys walk away.
So that's why I'm not going to...
So you can show me your name or ID, you can walk away.
We just want to talk to you.
I'm not going to talk to people who claim to be federal agents unless they can show me identification.
Okay, well, you see our badges.
I need to see... Is your full name on that badge?
No.
I'd like to see something with your full name, or I'm not going to talk to you.
I prefer you not to broadcast it.
This will be going online as soon as you walk away.
Well, all I want to do is talk to you about a post that was made, and if you happen to be the one that made the post.
I want to talk to you about you guys coming here. Say you make a salary of, I don't know what, low 100K? You guys making six figures? Factor in 50% expenses, overhead, maybe 100% expenses. Talking about burning a couple $100 an hour just here, let alone all the time you guys are spending to investigate something that you know is not against the law, right? Like you're familiar with. So then why would you come?
Because we wanted to make sure that there weren't any.
No, you're coming because you're part of a regime that does this kind of thing when you know laws aren't being broken, and that's an embarrassment, man. Didn't you guys read the Constitution? Do you not believe in America? Like, how do you do your jobs and go home?
We appreciate it.
You're walking away. Because nothing we did is against the law, and you guys are fuckheads that try to act like bullies. And I hope you go home and are embarrassed. You can't even say your name on camera because you know that what you're doing is embarrassing. You know Americans that believe in the Constitution think you're laughable. And you go home and you think about what you did today. Go home and think about it, you cowards. Drive away. Drive away.
Thank you for your time.
You're not welcome. You should be embarrassed. Embarrassing. You guys are embarrassing.
So there's that clip there. It's awesome. It is awesome when he's like, "Drive away, you cowards." We just want to see if you were one making that post, and he's like, "Hey, you make about 6 figures a year, right?" I mean, he's just that. You know what? He didn't, and that's the perfect way to deal with that situation. You don't escalate anything. You state your case. You're like, I need your full name. Please stop recording. Nope. I have a First Amendment right. This is going out on the internet as soon as you guys leave. It's perfect. I hope people can take a lesson from this.
Oh, yeah. On the broader note of that, everyone should be aware of their rights under law, under any sort of law enforcement. Anytime you're being detained, or even under the appearance of being detained by a police officer, you should definitely have any sort of law enforcement officer. You should know exactly what your rights are, and you should exercise them to the fullest. I love, there's a video that went around. It was making the rounds not too long ago. The video is kind of older, but it was making the rounds not too long ago. It was like a 45-minute video about some law professor. He used to be a prosecuting attorney, and then he was a defense attorney. And he was just basically going on about how even if you're innocent, just don't say a word. He's like, exercise all of your rights, because they will try to incriminate you every way they can. The cops obviously don't have, they are not required to tell you the truth. They're allowed to lie to you. So they're going to try to tell you something to get you to slip up, or to get you to admit to something you sometimes didn't even do. Because people who are ignorant will think that if they confess to something they didn't do, it'll get them out of trouble quicker, especially when you've got a cop telling you the whole time, just tell us what we want to hear, and things will be a lot easier for you. You know, if you tell us right now, we can help you out. But if you wait till later, we can't help you. So then you fall into this trap of either confessing to something you didn't do, or even if you did do it, it's those are your rights protected by the Constitution. You should exercise them every time.
Yeah, I can't. Warrior Class said that's a great clip. It's been all over X and other platforms, but I never get tired of seeing it. I'm gonna have to download it and keep it and archive it because that clip will be usable multiple times. We got to sit here and think about this. Again, the thought of Trump being president doesn't bring joy to my heart. But the thought of Kamala Harris being president scares the bejesus out of me. And we already have a Department of Justice that feels emboldened to go after American citizens willy-nilly for a number of made-up reasons. You get a Kamala Harris in there. She's emboldened already because she thinks you can be the biggest retard on the face of the earth and not be able to carry on a civilized, intelligent conversation and still be placed into the White House. How emboldened do you think she's going to feel? Like, I took an IQ test one time and I was barely above the mentally retarded thing, and look at me, I'm in the White House now. And you're like, okay. So with that being said, and listen, I say the word retarded all the time, and I'm not making fun of retarded people. It's just, I'm old school. I say that word a lot. If you take offense to it, I don't know what to tell you. I don't mean any harm. But it does speak volumes that if this person, this woman, Kamala Harris, is selected by the Democrat Party, now they did kind of build themselves a trap, because if they would have passed over her for some white person, oh my God, the wailing and the gnashing of teeth would have been so loud it drowned out all conversations in the United States. The left would have had a meltdown.
They own the left, though. That's what's funny is that I think they could have skipped over her because they own the media. All they would have had to do is make it blow over in 5 seconds. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go on.
No, you're partly right. You're partly right, but they still set a trap for themselves because they push this stuff so much in the media that they took a risk of the media turning on them. Like, oh my God, they passed over a woman of color. But it still doesn't make up for the fact that a woman with her intelligence level and the things she did as a prosecutor in California, the way she got her original position was getting into other positions, if you know what I mean. So and people in this country applauding it. Oh my God, we could have. I went and participated in the Labor Day parade for my local union. Never done it before. I'm like, oh, this would be kind of cool. Walk in a parade. I like most of the people. I liked all the people that were there. They're cool. I get along with them well. But one of the guys there is like, oh, we're going to get our first female president this year. And I'm thinking, God, I hope not. I didn't say. I turned around and I walked away. And I'm thinking, that just, I like the guy. He's such a good dude. Like, he'd about probably give you the shirt off his back. Great guy. But then they say things like that, and you're like, okay, you're clearly not paying attention to anything. You're paying attention to nothing. You haven't listened to one word. You've heard her, but you haven't listened to her and what she says, and this drivel and these trivial things that she puts out there. You're like, you haven't listened to anything this woman said. Because if you did, not just a little red flag, like you should be pulling down your American flag and flying a huge red flag in front of your house if you have a flagpole outside. And they're like, what's that mean? Like, have you heard that woman talk? That's my red flag. That represents all the stupid that came out of her mouth in 5 minutes. And if I continue to add to this flag, I'm going to have to build like 4 flagpoles in a row and tie them across, stitch them together. It irritates me so much that people are are just clamping onto this $25,000 assistance for first-time home buyers, not thinking that the price of the home is going to go up $25,000 because that's an automatic mechanism of the market. Instantly, $25,000 jumping, just everything. I'm going to end now, and I want to add to this real quick, and then I'll let you speak your piece, Brandon. On the flip side, we have Trump saying, and it'd be great if it was true, even though it's not quite constitutional, it's a good step. When he said, we should just stop taxing overtime. He said that, but then 5 minutes later in his speech, he's like, we should cap credit card interest rates at 10% temporarily. The crowd that cheered for the removal of taxes from overtime also cheered for the cap on credit card interest rates. I'm like, okay, so you're anti-tax, but you're still kind of socialist because you want to control certain sectors of the market. You guys aren't making yourselves very intelligent sounding.
Not that, I mean, what you're going to see is people with low credit scores who could have got a credit card or could have attained a line of credit before won't be able to obtain a line of credit. They're just going to have to raise the standard because my credit card interest rate, so like it's at like 24%. I don't have a balance on it. I pay it off at the end of every month, but for the cashback options. But every credit card that I know of, everyone I know with a credit card's interest rates over 10%. I mean, you'll get 8% on a personal loan, like a one-time personal loan, but they won't give you an 8%, 10% interest rate on a credit card unless you have Donald Trump's kind of money, I guess, or something, because that makes no sense to the average consumer. It makes no sense. Again, like Joseph Solis Mullen was saying when he was on our show the other day, it's not. Libertarians like to say that a lot of people are libertarians, they just don't know it yet. I think he's right when he says a lot of people are statists. They just prefer a different flavor of the state, because you can't be against like price controls for housing, but then be for price controls for credit cards. And then, I mean, I think credit card companies are shady. I think they do some shady things sometimes, but they're mostly capitalists. They mostly are, you know, when you sign a contract with a bank for a loan or for a credit card or for some sort of financial transaction, you signed it. Like, you signed on the dotted line. Like, when I got my credit card, I paid thousands and thousands of dollars on interest from when I used to be in credit card debt. And I'm not mad at the credit card company. I'm mad at myself because I've signed the contract when I was 19 and I didn't pay the money back when I said I would, and they charged me for it, which is business. I don't know. I think the whole thing is dumb.
Well, and the thing is, too, that people aren't thinking about is when you sign, you get this credit card, that's money that doesn't belong to you. They're putting the risk into giving you the credit card. And now, again, I watched a documentary many, many years ago. I think it was on HBO. It's all about credit cards. Now, they were talking to people that worked at for a credit card company, and they're like, oh, yeah, when somebody sends their payment in, sometimes we'll just hold it till it's a day late so we get the late fee. And then they were going to these college campuses, and there were just lines of credit card companies there offering these college kids credit cards because they knew they were going to charge them through the roof and they're going to make all that in. So, yes, they do, but they don't ever force anybody to take a credit card. Therein is the difference. They're not forcing you to take that credit card. You made a choice. Now, it would help if our public education system, which is asking a lot, would teach kids about trying to live as debt-free as possible, to not take on 6, 7 credit cards, max them all out, and pay on them for 20 years to get rid of them if you don't ever charge anything on them again. It would be nice if the kids had some guidance from their parents or educators like, hey, don't do these things. You want to try to be as debt-free as possible. But that's not what people are taught. They're taught to be debtors. And it doesn't bode well for a free society if the majority of the people are debtors, because when the government runs into debt and then you are in debt and then the government's like, hey, we're going to have, and then the government creates inflation by printing all the money. You're the one taking it. You're taking the brunt of your financial decisions and the government's financial decisions. It's all falling on your shoulders. So, the young kids that are in school need this guidance. Like, hey, you got to think about things. If the feds decide to print trillions of more dollars when you're already in an inflationary environment and really cause you're screwed. Everyone is screwed. Unless you're super wealthy, we're all going to take it right in the keister. So, but that's the thing that people got to come to grips with. Yes, maybe the credit cards and the way they do business is a little shady, but they don't force a single soul to take a credit card. And people got to come to grips with that. Like, you made the choice. And we live in this victim society. There's too many people that love to play the victim card at any time. They make a bad financial decision. That's their fault. They look at the interest rate they charge me. Yeah, didn't you look at that before you signed the document? Or did you need the money so bad you didn't care and you just wrote your name on it? That happens all the time. I've been guilty of that in the past myself. And I paid that stuff off, and I'm like, never doing that again. I will just walk to work or whatever I got to do, but I'm not doing that anymore, and we just need more people to understand that.
I am really glad you brought up that point, because I was going to bring it up if you didn't, that it's the education system's problem why people are falling into these debt traps. Like, my parents were pretty good about trying to teach me fiscal responsibility, but until you have a job and have managed money, you don't know. Like, it's something that you benefit a lot more from real world experience versus something you can be told. But a lot of people just aren't being told, or they don't understand fully the consequences of not paying, of being into credit card debt. Like, you don't understand how not only do you have to pay that money back every month, or it starts to immediately charge you interest, that not paying it causes damage to your credit, which is affecting you, getting loans for a house or a car in the future. Like, our education system fails us in a lot of ways, and in finances particularly is another big one. One thing I wanted to note to what you were just saying about how, both sides are playing this I don't know economics very well game. Donald Trump's I want to just bring up Donald Trump's gonna hike up tariffs in lieu of taxes for but all the consumers in America are going to be the ones paying for that tariff, because you're going to put that tariff on the Chinese company. They're going to raise the price of their goods. The American company buying it's going to raise the price of that. And then the only person, they're going to pass the buck along until it can't be passed anymore, which is going to be us, the consumer. And then really quickly, before before we turn to anything else, I just wanted to bring up that you played that clip last week of Thomas Massey going on and on about Mike Johnson. First of all, that was an awesome clip. And but secondly, it already came true. Mike Johnson already took the SAVE Act off the table. He's going to push through a continued spending, but he's not giving you that shiny metal object that he was dangling in front of you. They held the carrot out, you chased it, and then they pulled it back. They pulled the wool right over our head already. He called it. He said it. He's like, sorry to the Republicans in this room. I'm sorry, but you're not getting the SAVE Act. He's like, they do it every time. They put some big shiny object into the continuing resolution. They tie it to something nice and shiny, and then it doesn't end up going through in the end. And that's exactly what happened. And so if you're wanting to know why our country's in such a debt crisis, it's because people like Mike Johnson, the Republicans, refuse to take a stand on spending.
Yeah, Thomas Massey is almost, and I say this and not to compare it, some kind of deify anybody, but Thomas Massey is almost becoming like, he is like the second coming of Ron Paul. Ron Paul would get up and say, this is going to happen. Now, it might take a few years, and then it happens. All the freaking time, Ron Paul was like, if you keep doing this, you're going to get this, and then, bam, it hit. And I don't know, you would think after a while these people would be like, hey, Mr. Paul, can I talk to you for a second about this bill? Like, what do you think's going to happen? Oh, this is what's going to happen. Maybe I should vote no. And they don't. They just treat a Massey or a Ron Paul like the crazy uncle. Oh, your uncle's probably going to start drinking at Thanksgiving and talk about the government and stuff. Just let him spiel. Just don't talk to him too much. Don't ask him too many questions because he gets on his anti-government roll or he starts getting mad at the government. So just don't say nothing about government around crazy Uncle Paul. But I hate that they get treated like they're the crazy ones. That they get their 5 minutes to talk. They lay out an immaculate argument on why they shouldn't be doing these things. Like, it's bulletproof. You can't look at it and go, I can tear a hole in this one. No, it's bulletproof. And they just look at him like, oh, God, he's talking again. Can you make that guy shut up? But, again, they are all, for the most part, and he calls them out, you're all addicted to spending. You can't stop. Now, I don't know what kind, because people have drug problems, the families will have interventions on them. Like, we're going to send you to rehab. I don't know how many people you'd have to send to D.C. to walk into the Capitol and be like, hey, every rep in this building, every senator, come with us. And they're like, where are we going on a field trip? Yes, we're going on a field trip. You're going to go to where there's a whole lot of people with a whole lot of money, and they'll all just kill each other, stampede each other to get on the buses. And you just drive them to a Gamblers Anonymous, but it'd be a Spenders Anonymous. And you're like, hey, you're going to be holed up in here for a couple months until you get off your addiction to spending money, and then watch them all freak the hell out. That'd be entertaining TV. Just prank all of Congress and make them think they're going to where they're going to get millions of dollars from lobbyists, and it's just some place and there's just a bunch of people staring out the windows as they walk in. They're like, this is the weirdest lobbyist building I've ever been in. And like, ha ha ha. And they all get in and you just lock the doors like, you ain't going anywhere for a while till you stop spending money. My money. And then the other people in there are like beating the crap out of them like, hey, you spent that. Weren't you the one that decided to spend the money on pheasants on cocaine? They're like, yeah, and then they just start getting pummeled. Oh, get them off me. Oh, that would be
smuggling in. They're smuggling in checkbooks to write checks. Like, are you spending money over there? No, I'm not spending money. I don't know what you're talking about.
It's the syringe in the neck, and they sedate them and drag them back in their room and shackle them up like, I'm telling you, no contraband. We were told to leave the checkbooks at home. Oh, my God, that'd be freaking hilarious. Well, we're getting down to the end of the show. So, Brandon, any parting thoughts before we close out this evening?
No, just pretty much just glad to be back. Glad to be part of this this Missouri Liberty Report community. Thankful to all the people in the live chat. Thanks for sticking around and listening to me talk for 2 hours, me and John. Go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, follow. Please share this show on social media. Share it on your Facebook. Share it on X. Anywhere you can to get more people to watch us instead of the mainstream media. That's how we're fighting the power, me and John here.
That is one thing that I neglect to tell people. Hey, make sure you like and share. That's how shows like this, get more traction, is just word of mouth. And I get it. We don't have the most professional setup. We don't have studios, and because we don't make no money. We're not in this to make millions of dollars. We're trying to spread the ideas of liberty and freedom. So generally, unless we decide to get shady and start pandering to Republicans only, this show's not going anywhere. Really. It's not going to become some syndicated program because we're not. And, when I had Tom Martz on the other night, or a couple weeks ago, I was talking, these Patriot radio stations drive me nuts because they're good on a few things, but they just pander to the Republicans. It's like they know if they don't, that a lot of people just tune them out because they're not talking the normal talking
their
points.
Sponsor money will go away. That's what it is, too.
Yeah, they love to, and it's like, God, can't you just be more principled than that? But I guess not. All right, folks. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Missouri Liberty Report. Thanks so much again for joining us this week. And like Brandon said, if you like what you hear, subscribe, tell tell your family, tell your friends about the Missouri Liberty Report. Let's grow the audience. Let's grow the message of liberty. But that's going to do it, folks. We'll see you next Friday right here at 6:30 on the Missouri Liberty Report.